The night was thick with darkness, the kind that swallowed the world whole. A pale sliver of moon hung low in the sky, casting faint shadows on the empty highway. The asphalt stretched endlessly ahead, a black ribbon slicing through the dense forest that loomed on either side. The road felt alive, like it was breathing, waiting for something to happen. Then came the roar of an engine. A sleek, cherry-red sports car tore down the highway, its headlights carving through the void. Behind the wheel, Derek's knuckles were white against the leather grip, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He had been driving for hours, fueled by a volatile mix of anger, alcohol, and adrenaline. Road rage had become his closest companion, feeding the fire that burned hotter with every mile. Derek had always been quick to anger. A slow driver, a missed turn, a honk from another car. Any slight could set him off. Tonight, it had been a trucker who cut him off at a rest stop. The confrontation was brief but explosive, ending with Derek flipping the man off and peeling out of the lot, tires screeching. Now alone on the highway, his fury simmered beneath the surface. The speedometer climbed 80, 90, 100. The engine screamed, but Derek didn't care about speed limits, blind curves, or the fact that he could barely see past the reach of his headlights. The rush was all that mattered, the power of the machine beneath him, the illusion of control. Then he saw it. Taillights in the distance. Dull red embers against the night, growing brighter as he closed the gap. Another car, gliding at a steady pace, its dark silhouette barely visible. Derek sneered. Who the hell drove this slow at this hour? Didn't they know this road was his? He slammed the horn, the blaring sound splitting the night. No reaction. The car held its course, its speed unchanged. Derek's irritation flared. He flicked his high beams on and off, strobing the darkness. Still, the driver didn't budge. Move, you idiot, Derek growled, his voice drowned by the roar of the engine. He swerved into the left lane, pressing the gas pedal to the floor. The sports car surged forward, closing the distance in seconds. As he pulled alongside, Derek turned, ready to throw a middle finger at the driver. But what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The car was a black Audi, sleek and high-end, its tinted windows reflecting the moonlight. But something was wrong. The air around it seemed to hum, vibrating with an energy Derek could feel in his bones. A wrongness, an unnatural presence that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. For a moment, hesitation crept in, but then anger overpowered it. He wasn't about to be intimidated by some rich prick in a fancy car. Derek yanked the wheel, cutting in front of the Audi. Tires shrieked as metal kissed metal. A fender bender, just enough to make a point. He laughed, sharp and bitter. That's what you get. Then the Audi's headlights flared, a blinding white that swallowed the road, swallowing him. Derek squinted, blinking against the glare as the black car pulled up beside him once more. This time, the driver's window rolled down. Derek's heart stuttered. The man behind the wheel was pale, almost ghostly in the moonlight. His features were sharp, cheekbones high, lips thin and bloodless. But it was his eyes, dark, endless voids that held Derek captive. Cold, ancient, inhuman. The man smiled, revealing perfect white teeth, canines just a little too long, a little too sharp. You shouldn't have done that, he murmured, his voice smooth as ice sliding down Derek's spine. The Audi surged forward, cutting him off. Derek stomped the brakes, his tires screaming against the pavement. His pulse thundered in his ears. What the hell was happening? A few yards ahead, the Audi rolled to a stop. The driver's door opened. Derek's breath hitched. The man stepped out, impossibly tall, his movements fluid and predatory. He wore a tailored black suit that seemed to drink in the night. Power radiated from him, thick as the darkness itself. Derek should have floored it, should have gotten the hell out of there, but he couldn't move. The man approached, slow and deliberate, like a hunter closing in on wounded prey. When he reached the driver's side, he leaned down, his face inches from Derek's. Up close, his eyes burned with an eerie, unnatural glow. His scent was strange, metallic, like copper and something older, something primal. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he whispered, but you're about to find out. Derek opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg, but no sound came. The man's smile widened. In a blur, his hand shot through the open window, fingers closing like a vice around Derek's throat. The world spun as he was yanked from the car, his body slamming onto the asphalt. Pain exploded through him, but it was nothing compared to the terror coursing through his veins. The man loomed over him, his shadow swallowing Derek whole. "You think you're untouchable?" The man hissed. "That you can take whatever you want, do whatever you want." His grip tightened. "You're nothing." Derek clawed at the iron grip, his strength meaningless against it. Then he saw the fangs, long, glistening, deadly. The man leaned in, his breath freezing against Derek's skin. "This will hurt. Sharp. Searing. Darkness." When Derek woke, he was alone. The highway was silent. The Audi was gone. He sat up slowly, his body aching, his mind foggy. He touched his neck. His fingers came away sticky with blood. A sick wave of panic crashed over him. He staggered to his feet, legs trembling. His car was still there, the front end crumpled from the collision. Derek climbed inside, gripping the wheel with shaking hands. He turned the key. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. He drove. Fast. Too fast. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting, what? That black Audi? That man. But something was wrong. His skin was cold. His senses sharp, too sharp. The night looked different, clearer, sharper, too vivid. And then there was the thirst, a gnawing, unbearable hunger. By the time he reached the next town, it was all he could think about. It consumed him, burned inside him. He pulled into a gas station, his hands trembling as he stepped out. A young attendant greeted him, flashing a friendly smile. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Derek didn't answer. He couldn't. The thirst was too much. He lunged. The last shreds of humanity slipped away as his fangs sank into flesh. When it was over, Derek stood there, trembling, his mouth stained with blood. Power surged through him. Strength. And horror. He had become a monster. And as he sped away into the night, the Audi's taillights flickered in the distance, watching, waiting. Derek was his now, and the night was far from over. The dust motes danced in the dim, amber light, filtering through the grimy window of crimson vinyl. But it wasn't just dust. The air clung to you, thick with the scent of old paper, the faint metallic tang of aged electronics, and something else, something that made the hairs on my neck prickle. I loved it. I loved the way the stacks of vinyl seemed to stretch into infinity, the way the air hummed with forgotten melodies. Julian and Celeste, the owners, were off. Not in a screaming at the moon kind of way, but in a subtle, unsettling manner. Their skin was pale, almost translucent. Their eyes seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and they carried a quiet, almost predatory intensity. They moved with a fluid grace that was almost too perfect. Rumors, of course, swirled. Whispers of late-night rituals, of missing persons, of a strange, unnatural pallor that seemed to deepen with each passing year. I dismissed them as small-town gossip, the kind that thrived on the fringes of the ordinary. Then I met Sarah, a whirlwind of vibrant energy, a splash of color in the muted tones of my life. She loved crimson vinyl as much as I did, her fingers tracing the grooves of vintage records with a reverence that mirrored my own. We'd spend hours there, lost in the music, the world outside fading away. One evening, Sarah lingered after closing, drawn to a rare pressing of a blues album. I waited outside, the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows. When she finally emerged, her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a terror that made my blood run cold. "We have to go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Now." She wouldn't elaborate, just pulled me away, her grip tight, her breath coming in ragged gasps. It wasn't until we were back in my apartment, the door locked and bolted, that she finally spoke. "I saw them," she said, barely a whisper. "I saw them, feeding." She described a scene that made my stomach churn. Julian and Celeste, their faces contorted in primal hunger, their teeth elongated, sinking into the neck of a young man, his body limp and lifeless. She described the metallic scent of blood, the low, guttural sounds that echoed through the back room. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell her she was imagining things, that she'd misread some strange, unsettling scene. But the terror in her eyes was too real, too raw. We started digging. Not into ancient lore or dusty occult texts, but into public records, missing persons reports, local history archives, and we found a pattern. A string of disappearances, mostly young, transient individuals, coinciding with the years Julian and Celeste had been in town. We found old newspaper clippings, accounts of strange, unexplained deaths, always attributed to accidents or overdoses. Then we found the building's history, a dark, unsettling past. A private sanatorium had once stood there, operating in the early 1900s. Rumors spoke of unethical, even monstrous, experiments conducted on its patients. The pieces started to fit together, forming a grim, horrifying puzzle. We weren't dealing with supernatural monsters, not in the Hollywood sense. We were dealing with something far more terrifying. Humans, twisted and corrupted by something dark and ancient, something that had turned them into predators. We went to the police, armed with our research, our evidence. They listened, their faces impassive, their eyes skeptical. They told us they'd look into it, but we knew better. We were on our own. We decided to confront them, not with silver bullets or wooden stakes, but with the truth. We compiled our findings, our evidence, and presented it to them. Not in the back room of Crimson Vinyl, but in the harsh light of day, in front of the few remaining customers. Their reaction was swift and brutal. They didn't deny the accusations. They didn't plead for mercy. They simply moved, with a speed and ferocity that made it clear they were not human. There was no dramatic battle, no heroic showdown, just a chaotic, desperate struggle, a blur of violence and fear. We used what we could, heavy record sleeves, a broken microphone stand, to defend ourselves. We managed to escape, leaving behind a scene of shattered glass and overturned record bins. We fled, not into the night, but into the crowded streets, the anonymity of the city our only refuge. We never went back to Crimson Vinyl. We never saw Julian or Celeste again. We don't know what happened to them, whether they fled, went into hiding, or were finally brought to justice. But we know what we saw. We know what they are. And we know that the darkness they represent isn't confined to dusty record stores or whispered rumors. It's out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim.